I am Victoria, 32 years old, and on our anniversary, my husband poured wine for another woman while I sat at the same table. The restaurant glowed with gold light, crystal glasses catching the chandelier above. Ethan leaned toward her, laughing softly, his hand brushing hers as if it belonged there. He never looked at me. Have you ever felt the world tilt while everyone else stays steady? That was me in that moment. His mother, Helen, smiled like the scene had been arranged for her amusement. She leaned close and whispered, "Relax, Victoria. Ethan works hard. Let him enjoy himself." Enjoy himself, with a woman in red silk who stared back at me without shame. I held my fork, forcing my hands to stay steady. The waiter asked about dessert, and I said yes, just to hear my voice exist. Ethan raised his glass for a toast. He thanked his firm. He thanked his mother. He never said my name. He called the woman in red a lifesaver. Laughter rippled around the table. I cut into my cake, chewing slowly, while my chest burned. The woman in red blinked at me, calm, certain, as though she knew her place had already been carved. The ride home was a quiet knife. City lights flickered across his face. Ethan talked about clients, about numbers, about being late again this week. His left hand rested on the wheel, bare of the ring he had forgotten for months. At the door, he kissed my cheek like a stranger and vanished into his office. I stood in the hall, pressing my palm to the wall for balance. The house felt colder than the street. I brewed tea, sat at the kitchen table, and began to write. Small lines, short notes, the time of the dinner, the dress, the smile Helen gave her, the words Ethan used. I wrote because it made the fire in my chest slow down. My pen remembered for me. Later, near midnight, I walked past his office. The door was half closed, a glow on his jaw. I heard a laugh that wasn't his, a woman's voice. "Tomorrow works, same hotel." His reply was warm, private. Heat rushed through me, but no tears came. I stepped back, silent, careful not to creak the floor. In our bedroom, I opened the window. Cool air washed my skin. My mother once told me, breathe like the ocean when life tries to drown you. In, out, in, out. I did. It worked. The question came, sharp and clear. Do I want peace or truth? Peace is silence, a dark room, pretending. Truth is fire. I chose fire. I opened my phone, created a new note, and named it Light. I listed passwords I knew, dates he worked late, photos Helen had sent when he wasn't there, the toast from dinner, the hotel plan from his call. I pressed save. I sent the note to my email. My chest loosened. At 2 a.m., he crawled into bed, asleep in seconds. I lay awake, listening to his breathing. It sounded unfamiliar, like a stranger sharing my pillow. Moonlight slid across the wall. Have you ever watched night move and felt your life move too? That was me. I saw a path forming. Observe, record, confirm. No begging. No fighting shadows. Truth would walk on its own legs. Before dawn, I brewed coffee, pale face staring back in the mirror. My voice, when I tested it, was steady. I whispered to myself, "We start today." The morning after that night felt heavier than most. Ethan left early, his tie crooked, his cologne sharp in the air. He kissed my forehead out of habit, not affection, and was gone before the coffee finished brewing. I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook open, last night's words staring back at me like warnings carved into stone. The woman in red, the toast, the hotel, the silence. I went to work, but every task blurred. Emails scrolled by, meetings ended, and I remembered nothing. My colleagues laughed about weekend plans, their voices distant. My hands typed, but my mind replayed Ethan's voice saying, "Same hotel." Each time it cut deeper. Have you ever carried a secret so heavy it made even sunlight feel cruel? That was me. That evening, Helen called. Her voice was smooth, syrupy, as if nothing had happened. Darling, Ethan might be late again this week. Don't worry, he's working so hard. Be supportive. I bit my tongue until it hurt. She didn't want me supportive. She wanted me blind. She wanted her son free of questions, free to live two lives while I smiled quietly in the corner. I agreed softly, letting her think I was still the obedient wife. Inside, I was filing her words into the folder labeled Light. By the third day, the signs multiplied. His shirt smelled faintly of perfume I didn't own. His phone vibrated with late-night messages. He laughed more at the screen than he ever did with me. At dinner, he asked no questions, gave no answers. Silence had become his language, and I realized silence can cut sharper than lies. Lies at least speak. Silence erases you. One night, I gathered courage and checked the drawer in his desk. A receipt lay folded, dated 2 nights ago from a hotel across town. Dinner for 2, wine listed in the margin. I stood there holding the paper, my hands cold, the house pressing in around me. Proof. I finally had proof. Not just suspicion, not just perfume, but undeniable evidence. I placed it into my folder. The page named Light grew heavier, more powerful. I didn't confront him. Not yet. To speak too soon would mean excuses, denials, tears meant to distract. I had seen Margaret, his mother, master those tactics. I knew Ethan had learned from her. No, I told myself. Truth must be built. Truth must be ready to stand alone in the open. At night, lying awake, I thought about the woman in red. Did she know about me? Did she know I sat at the same table while she leaned into my husband's smile? Or had she convinced herself she was the only one? Anger rose in waves, but beneath it sat something harder. Resolve. This wasn't just betrayal, it was theft. They had stolen my place, my dignity, my years, and I wanted it back. I remembered something my mother told me once. When people show you who they are, believe them the first time. Ethan had shown me. Helen had shown me. The woman in red had looked me in the eye without flinching. I finally believed them. I looked at my reflection in the dark window, the city lights flickering behind me. You are not erased, I whispered. My voice sounded different, steady, sharp. Not a plea. A promise. That night I made another list. The people who would be in the room when the truth came out. Margaret, Ethan, the family who always laughed at Helen's jokes, his colleagues. I wanted them all there. If humiliation was their weapon, then exposure would be mine. When I finally closed my eyes, I didn't feel broken. I felt like a fuse waiting for the match. The days blurred together, each one marked by Ethan's absence and the quiet I wore like a second skin. He left earlier, stayed out later, and when he was home, his eyes were locked to the glow of his phone. Once, I leaned over while he showered and saw her name flash across the screen. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The curve of his smile as he typed told me more than words ever could. I began noticing details I had ignored before. His credit card slipped from his wallet one morning, and I saw the charge. Roses, delivered not to our home, but to an address across town. His tie smelled faintly of perfume again. He came home humming once, a tune he had never sung for me. Each sign was a needle, and together they stitched a pattern I could no longer pretend not to see. Helen, as always, played her part. She called with that careful tone she used when she wanted to disguise cruelty as advice. Darling, men work hard. Don't press him with questions. It makes you seem insecure. No man likes that. Her words slid through the phone like oil. She wasn't protecting me. She was protecting him. protecting their little theater where I played the obedient wife while they rewrote the script around me. I listened, murmured something soft, and then added her words to my growing record. The folder in my email, the one I called Light, swelled with receipts, notes, and memories. I took photographs of his shirts when perfume clung to the fabric. I wrote down times, dates, addresses. I was careful, patient, steady. Anger might scream, but revenge whispers. Revenge waits. One evening, Ethan stumbled in late, cheeks flushed, smelling faintly of wine. He dropped onto the couch and closed his eyes. "Rough day," he muttered. I sat across the room, the receipt from that very hotel folded in my hand, and studied the man I used to love. Once, his exhaustion would have moved me. Once, I would have touched his hair, kissed his temple, asked how I could help. But love had eroded. All I saw now was a stranger hiding behind silence, letting me drown while he swam free. Have you ever realized the person lying beside you has already left, even if their body remains? That was the night I stopped hoping for answers. He wasn't going to confess. He wasn't going to choose me. Silence was his language, and I had finally learned to read it. I started planning in earnest. I researched lawyers quietly, my laptop angled away when Ethan walked by. I bookmarked venues that allowed private events. I even spoke casually to one of his colleagues at the market, asking when the firm's next gala would be. I tucked the answer away like a seed. At night, I dreamed of standing in a room filled with the people who had laughed at Helen's jokes, who had ignored the way I disappeared in silence. In the dream, I wasn't erased anymore. I was the one holding the microphone, the one with proof glowing on a screen behind me. I woke with my chest pounding, but it wasn't fear. It was anticipation. One morning, Ethan left in a hurry, forgetting his laptop bag. I carried it to the car, and when I handed it over, his eyes flickered with something sharp. Fear. He grabbed it too quickly, muttered thanks, and drove away. That look told me everything. Whatever he was hiding lived inside that laptop. I didn't need to break in to confirm it. His panic was confirmation enough. That night, I stood at the window, city lights stretching far beyond me, and whispered again to my reflection, "You are not erased." My voice carried no shake. The woman staring back looked nothing like the one at the anniversary dinner. She looked like someone waiting for the perfect moment to strike, and she knew when that moment came, silence would no longer protect him. The shift in our home became impossible to ignore. Ethan's body was present, but his mind lived elsewhere. He came in later, left earlier, and carried his phone like a shield. When I asked simple things, "What time will you be home? Should I cook dinner?" his replies were clipped, one word, sharp. "Work. Late. Don't wait." His tone wasn't tired. It was dismissive, the way a boss speaks to an employee. One night I tried to reach him with honesty. "Ethan," I said softly as he changed his shirt, "we don't talk anymore. What's happening to us?" He pulled the fresh shirt over his head and smirked like I'd told a joke. "You worry too much, Victoria. Go to bed." Then he walked out, leaving me in the half-lit room, my question unanswered, my chest burning. Have you ever asked for love and been handed silence instead? That silence bruises more than words ever could. Helen continued her performance. She called to remind me to support her son. She said, "Don't be dramatic. He's under pressure." Once, when I tried to mention the late nights, she chuckled. "Men stray, dear. It doesn't mean anything. Don't push him away with suspicion." I sat there listening, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. She wasn't just covering for him. She was guiding him, excusing him, coaching him to betray me. The proof grew. A lipstick smudge once, faint but visible on his collar. A hotel keycard slipped in his coat pocket, a text notification flashing before he could swipe it away. I collected each detail, adding it to my folder, the one I now checked every night like a ritual. I called it light, but inside it was fire. Every piece of evidence was kindling, waiting for the moment to ignite. One evening, Ethan left his phone on the counter while he showered. It buzzed once, twice, 3 times. My pulse hammered, but I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. I had enough already. Instead, I stared at the glow of the screen and realized something. Temptation wasn't my enemy. Patience was my power. If I opened that phone, he'd spin excuses, accuse me of paranoia. But if I waited, if I built my wall of truth higher, no excuse would stand against it. That night, I wrote a list in my notebook. Not just what I had found, but who I wanted in the room when the truth came out. Helen, the relatives who laughed at her insults, his colleagues who thought our marriage was picture perfect. I wanted them all. If humiliation was their theater, then I would turn the stage against them. Lying in bed, Ethan turned his back to me as always. His breathing came steady, detached. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed love meant loyalty, who thought silence meant peace. That girl was gone. The woman staring at the dark ceiling was something else. She was a witness. She was a recorder. She was a storm waiting to break. Have you ever felt betrayal turn into clarity? That night I did. The path was sharp now. Collect, prepare, expose. Ethan thought silence protected him. Helen thought cruelty disguised as advice made her powerful. But they had both underestimated the woman sitting quietly in the same house. When the clock struck 2, I slipped out of bed, walked to the window, and opened it wide. Cold night air rushed in, clearing the fog inside me. I whispered into the darkness, steady and low. Your silence is your shield, Ethan. Soon it will be your undoing. And with that, I closed the window, my mind calm, my course set. The countdown had begun. The days turned colder, and with them, my patience sharpened. Ethan believed my silence meant ignorance. He didn't see the quiet glances, the way my pen moved across the page each night, the folders hidden deep in my email. He didn't notice that while he was vanishing into late nights and locked screens, I was building a story brick by brick. Helen's voice still arrived on cue, smooth and condescending. Don't let little things upset you, Victoria. A good wife knows when to close her eyes. I murmured agreement, though inside I wanted to laugh. Close my eyes? My eyes had never been wider. I wrote down her words as soon as the call ended, every phrase another piece of the puzzle. Helen wasn't just excusing his betrayal. She was preparing me to accept it. She thought she was clever, but her voice had become evidence too. The folder I called light grew heavier. Hotel receipts, bank charges, wine orders, photographs of shirts carrying perfume that wasn't mine. I kept the tone clinical, detached, as if I were building a case file rather than documenting my own heartbreak. It steadied me. Pain blurred, but facts stayed sharp. One Friday night, Ethan walked in, loosened tie, hair mussed, smile lingering from somewhere else. He dropped onto the couch, scrolling his phone, chuckling softly. I stood in the doorway and studied him. Once, that smile would have warmed me. Now it felt like a blade. He noticed my stare. "What?" he asked flatly. I shook my head. "Nothing." He shrugged and went back to his screen. That was our marriage now. Shrugs and screens. Later that evening, I slipped into his office. Papers were scattered across his desk, contracts mixed with personal notes. A small envelope sat half-hidden beneath a folder. Inside was a bill from a jeweler, a necklace. Expensive. Not for me. I held it in my hands, the weight almost unbearable, then slid it back into place. My hands didn't shake. I walked out quietly, added the detail to my file, and made tea as though nothing had happened. Have you ever realized calm can feel more powerful than rage? That was me, calm like steel. At night, lying awake, I imagined the scene I was preparing. A room filled with family, colleagues, people who thought they knew Ethan, people who thought they knew me. A projector humming to life, slides flickering across the wall, receipts, photographs, dates, every truth too solid to deny. I pictured Helen's pearls catching the light as her face drained of color. I pictured Ethan's silence breaking at last, not into excuses but into shame. The thought didn't comfort me, it steadied me. The more I planned, the less I spoke. Ethan mistook my quiet for surrender. He came home humming, careless, certain that I was too weak to move. He didn't see that weakness had turned to armor. He didn't notice that I had stopped asking where he was going, stopped waiting at the table, stopped looking for pieces of the man I once loved. Love wasn't part of this anymore. Truth was, one evening, while he showered, I sat at the kitchen table with my folder spread before me. The lamp's glow fell across the papers like stage lights. My chest rose and fell in a slow rhythm. The evidence was complete enough to crush him. I whispered the steps aloud. Observe, record, reveal. 3 steps. Simple. Final. When Ethan walked back into the room, towel around his shoulders, he glanced at me. "You're quiet again," he said with mild irritation. I smiled faintly and replied, "Sometimes silence says more than words." He frowned, confused, but I turned back to my notes. He didn't press. He never did. That night, before sleep, I opened the window again and let the cold air flood in. The city lights glimmered below, alive and indifferent. My voice was steady when I whispered into the night, "Soon." That single word carried every plan, every wound, every truth I had gathered. The storm wasn't coming anymore. I was the storm, waiting for the right moment to break. The shift in the house grew louder even in silence. Ethan walked around like a man with 2 lives, slipping from one to the other without shame. His phone was glued to his hand, his eyes fixed on it as if I wasn't standing 2 feet away. He started dressing better too. New suits, polished shoes, hair always sharp. Once he dressed for me. Now he dressed for someone else. I said nothing. I watched. At breakfast, I poured his coffee, listening as he mumbled about long hours at the office. He didn't see me slip the receipt from his briefcase. Another hotel charge. Another date. I placed it in my folder later that morning. Each piece was a nail. Each date a line in the story I was writing. He thought I was shrinking. He thought my silence meant surrender. But I was building walls around him, higher each day. Helen visited one afternoon while Ethan was at work. She walked through the door with her polished smile, carrying a basket of fruit like it was peace. "You look pale," she said, glancing at me. "You should take better care of yourself. Ethan needs a wife who's steady." I poured her tea and kept my face calm. She sipped and added, "Don't ask too many questions, dear. Men pull away when wives nag. If you want to keep him, learn to stay quiet." Her words were knives disguised as advice. But I nodded politely, thanked her for the fruit, and after she left, I wrote everything down. She thought she was teaching me obedience. She had no idea she was giving me ammunition. That night, Ethan returned late, smelling of cologne that wasn't his usual. He tossed his jacket on the chair, checked his phone, and smirked at whatever message flashed across the screen. I asked softly, "Good day?" He looked at me, surprised, almost suspicious, then nodded. "Busy." That single word was all I got. I smiled faintly and turned back to the dishes. He mistook it for acceptance. In truth, I had already begun making calls. Quiet ones. To the restaurant manager Helen liked to brag about. To a tech friend of mine who knew how to set up a presentation without questions. To a lawyer whose number I had saved months earlier. Just in case. Each conversation was short, careful, planned. By the end of the week, the pieces were in motion. At night, I rehearsed in my head. Not anger, not screaming. Calm words, simple truths, receipts, dates, evidence displayed in cold light for everyone to see. I didn't want to win an argument. I wanted to end it. Have you ever realized that revenge isn't about rage, but about control? That's what filled me now. Control over every detail. Control over the timing. Ethan and Helen had stolen my voice for years. Now I was teaching it to return, one sharp syllable at a time. One evening, while Ethan showered, I walked into his office. His laptop was open, the screen still glowing. A message thread pulsed in front of me. Her name. Words filled with warmth he never used with me anymore. Promises. Plans. A photo of them together in the mirror of some hotel room. My stomach tightened, but my hand stayed steady. I took a picture with my phone, closed the laptop, and walked out. Proof had never been clearer. When Ethan emerged, towel slung low on his waist, he saw me by the window. "You're quiet again," he muttered. I turned my head slowly and met his eyes. "Sometimes silence is louder than anything else," I said. He frowned, confused, but said nothing. That was his way. Later, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling while he scrolled his phone. I whispered into the dark, too low for him to hear. "Your silence built this. Soon, it will bury you." The words steadied me. The countdown was no longer months or weeks. It had become days. The countdown ticked louder with every passing day. Ethan believed the walls of silence he had built were strong enough to protect him, but he didn't notice the cracks forming beneath his feet. He was careless now, too confident. That arrogance made him sloppy. One evening, he came home humming again, his jacket smelling of perfume that had no place in our house. He tossed his keys on the counter and went straight to his office. I followed quietly, standing in the doorway while he typed. He didn't even flinch at my presence. That's how invisible I had become to him. But invisibility was my weapon. While he ignored me, I was learning every detail, collecting every mistake. The folder I called Light was nearly complete. Receipts, photographs, text logs I had captured in quick glances. Even Helen's poisonous words, scribbled down word for word, stood as testimony. I organized them into neat piles at night, each piece a blade waiting to strike. When I clicked through the digital slides I had started to build, I felt something strange. Not grief, not rage, control. Helen still called, her voice dripping with superiority. "Ethan is important at work, Victoria. Don't distract him with your insecurities. Stand by him quietly and you'll be rewarded." I answered softly, my tone as polite as ever. She didn't realize every call was more evidence. Every phrase she spoke was another stone in the wall I was constructing around her and her son. The opportunity I had been waiting for came wrapped in her own pride. Helen announced she was organizing a luxury dinner at a private hall downtown, an evening she described as a celebration of family. She bragged about the guest list, about the elegance of the setting, about how Ethan would be recognized for his firm's latest success. My heart beat slow and steady as she spoke. She was planning her stage. She didn't know it would be mine. That night after the call, I reached out to the restaurant manager. My voice was calm, my request simple. A projector, a screen, space for a short slideshow. I said it was part of a family tribute. He agreed without question, pleased by the extra fee I offered. My preparations locked into place. At dinner the next evening, Ethan commented that I seemed calmer. "You're not asking questions anymore," he said, almost amused. I looked at him across the table and smiled faintly. Sometimes answers speak for themselves. He didn't understand, but his silence in reply told me enough. "Have you ever carried a secret so heavy that the moment you decide to release it, your body feels lighter?" That's what I felt each night as I rehearsed the scene in my head. The room glowing under chandeliers, Helen smiling with her pearls, Ethan smirking at his phone, and then the screen flickering to life. Receipts, photographs, proof. Silence breaking at last. Days passed, and my mask grew stronger. At family dinners, I laughed when expected, nodded when required, all the while memorizing every sneer, every chuckle at my expense. They thought I was fading again, but I was only waiting. One night, I stood at the mirror, folder in hand, and studied my reflection. My face looked calm, my eyes sharp. The woman staring back was not the one who sat quietly at the anniversary dinner, erased by silence. She was a storm contained in glass, ready to shatter. I closed the folder, placed it into my bag, and whispered to myself, "Almost." That single word echoed through the quiet house. Ethan slept soundly in the next room, blind to the fact that the silence he had built his comfort on was about to explode around him. The stage was set. The audience had been invited. All that remained was to turn on the light. The night of the dinner arrived cloaked in gold and glass. The private hall glowed under chandeliers, polished marble floors reflecting every light. Waiters moved like shadows with trays of champagne, laughter rising from polished mouths. It looked like a celebration, but for me it was a stage. For months I had carried humiliation in silence. Tonight, that silence would end. Helen swept into the room first, draped in pearls, her voice bright with pride. She greeted guests with kisses on both cheeks, her smile too wide, her laugh too loud. She thought this night belonged to her. Ethan followed, sharp in his tailored suit, the image of success. He stood tall, phone tucked away for once, as if he owned the room. His eyes skimmed over me briefly, but his expression held nothing. I was just part of the scenery. That was fine. Scenery doesn't draw attention until the lights shift. I took my seat at the long table near the center, the projector already in place against the far wall. No one noticed it. Why would they? A slideshow was normal at family dinners. Helen had been told it was a tribute, a simple gesture. She had smiled at the idea. Her arrogance blinded her. Dinner began with polished rituals, glasses raised, toasts offered. Helen praised Ethan for his dedication. She praised herself for her guidance. Guests clapped politely, smiling, sipping wine. I sipped too, my hand steady. Every sound in the room, clinking silver, soft music, Helen's practiced voice, felt like threads weaving together, threads I was about to cut. At one point, Helen leaned toward me, her smile sharp. "Victoria, isn't it wonderful to see Ethan shining like this? Some wives crumble under pressure, but you've stayed so quiet." The table chuckled at her dig. I smiled back, calm. "Yes," I said softly. "Silence has its place." She tilted her head, confused for a second, then turned back to her wine. She didn't understand. Not yet. As the main course cleared, my heart beat with slow precision. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The manager dimmed the lights, as we had arranged. Conversations faltered, heads turned. The projector hummed alive, casting a glow against the wall. The first image appeared. A receipt from a hotel, Ethan's name printed clear at the top. A murmur rippled through the room. The second slide came. A jewelry purchase, a necklace, billed to his account. Not for me. Whispers grew louder. Helen's smile stiffened, her pearls catching the flickering light. Ethan shifted in his chair, his face tightening. "What is this?" he muttered, his voice low. I didn't answer. The next slide spoke for me. A photo captured from his laptop, him and the woman in red reflected in a hotel mirror. Gasps erupted. The silence afterward was louder than any accusation. Helen's hand gripped her glass until it trembled. "This is nonsense," she said, her voice too high, too brittle. "Fabricated. Victoria is twisting." But the next slide cut her off. A bank statement, charges matching hotel dates, flowers, dinners. Each detail layered until denial had no space left. I rose slowly, my hands steady on the table. "You once said silence makes a good wife," I said, my voice carrying through the stunned room. "Tonight, I've decided silence makes a perfect weapon." Ethan's face paled. He opened his mouth, closed it again. For once, his silence betrayed him. Helen's lips trembled, but no words formed. The projector kept clicking, each image carving the truth deeper into the room. Family stared. Colleagues exchanged looks. The stage Helen had built to celebrate her son was now burning beneath their feet. I stood tall in the glow of the screen, the quiet mine at last. Have you ever felt years of erasure lift in a single breath? That was me, standing in the center, no longer the shadow, but the light. The room froze in a stunned silence. Faces that had moments earlier glowed with wine and laughter now shifted with unease, their eyes darting between the screen and Ethan, between the proof and Helen's trembling hands. The air felt heavy, thick with truth no one could deny. The projector clicked again, another receipt filling the wall, another line of betrayal carved into stone. Helen broke first. She pushed back her chair, pearls shaking at her throat, her voice shrill. "This is an attack. She's twisting things, making me and Ethan look like villains. You all know me. You all know my son." But her words sounded hollow, bouncing against evidence too sharp to ignore. No one met her eyes. Even those who once laughed at her cruel jokes stared down at their plates, unwilling to defend her now. Ethan sat stiff beside her, his jaw tight, his knuckles white against the table. His silence, once his weapon, now betrayed him. He tried to speak, "Victoria, this isn't..." But the next slide cut him off. A hotel photo, his face clear, his hand on the woman in red. Gasps erupted, a cousin muttering, "Unbelievable," under his breath. Ethan closed his mouth, his excuses strangled before they could form. I stepped forward, my voice calm but steady. "You mocked me for being quiet. You said silence was the mark of a good wife. Tonight, silence has spoken louder than either of you ever did." My eyes locked on Helen. "You taught him that betrayal could be hidden. You taught him silence was protection. Tell me, Helen, what do you call it when silence becomes evidence?" Her face flushed crimson, her lips quivering with rage, but no words came. She sank back into her chair, gripping her pearls as if they could shield her from the truth glaring on the wall. The guests shifted uncomfortably, whispers rising like a tide. One uncle muttered, "Disgraceful." Another shook his head and leaned away from Helen. The room that once served as her court now felt like her cage. Ethan looked around, searching for a lifeline, but no one moved. His own silence had isolated him, and now he drowned in it. I let the next slide fade into black, the screen humming quietly. The evidence had been shown. The story had been told. The truth now lived in the eyes of every person in that room. "Marriage," I said, my tone even, "is built on trust. Betrayal is bad enough. But silence? Silence erases love. Silence destroys more than lies ever could. You erased me, Ethan. You mocked me, Helen. Tonight, I erased the masks you both wore. The chandelier light caught the wetness in Ethan's eyes. He finally whispered, "Please, Victoria, we can talk about this." But his voice sounded small, broken. Too late. Helen reached for him, desperate, but he pulled his arm away. Even her grip had lost its power. I straightened, smoothing the fabric of my dress. For the first time in years, my body felt light, my chest free. Have you ever carried a weight so long that when it finally falls, you can barely recognize yourself without it? That was me. I wasn't trembling anymore. I wasn't invisible. I was steady. The guests rose one by one, offering short, awkward goodbyes. No one looked at Helen. Few looked at Ethan. They looked at me, some nodding softly, some with quiet respect. The room emptied slowly, leaving behind only silence, the kind I finally owned. I picked up my bag, slid the folder inside, and walked toward the door. Ethan called my name once more, but I didn't turn back. His voice no longer had power. His silence had already answered every question I could have asked. And as I stepped out into the cool night, I felt it. The moment my story stopped being about betrayal and started being about freedom. The ride home after the dinner was a quiet grave. Ethan drove with both hands locked on the wheel, his knuckles pale in the glow of the dashboard. He didn't speak. Neither did I. The silence stretched between us, thick and unbreakable. For years, his silence had erased me. Tonight, it erased him. When we reached the house, he closed the door harder than usual, his jaw tense. I walked inside calmly, setting my bag on the table, my shoes clicking against the floor. He finally broke. "How could you humiliate me like that?" His voice cracked with anger, but beneath it was fear. I turned slowly, meeting his eyes. "How could you humiliate me for years and expect me to stay quiet forever?" He opened his mouth, searching for excuses. "It wasn't what it looked like. I cut him off with a sharp wave of my hand. "Don't. Every receipt, every charge, every photograph spoke for itself. You can't silence proof." My voice didn't rise. It stayed low, calm, stronger than his fury. That unsettled him more than shouting ever could. Helen tried calling twice that night, her name flashing on his phone, but he didn't answer. For once, even she couldn't shield him. He sat on the couch, staring at the blank TV, his shoulders hunched. I stood in the doorway, watching the man I once loved crumble under the truth he thought would never reach daylight. I walked past him, into the bedroom, and began packing a suitcase. My hands folded clothes neatly, each piece landing with a soft thud. Ethan appeared in the doorway, panic flashing in his eyes. "You're leaving?" His voice was small, unfamiliar. I didn't stop folding. "Yes. I gave you silence for years. I gave you patience, loyalty, and love. You gave me lies, excuses, and silence that cut deeper than betrayal." He stepped forward, desperate now. "We can fix this. We can go to counseling. Please, Victoria, don't walk away." His words shook, but I didn't falter. I zipped the suitcase shut, lifted it with steady hands, and faced him. Counseling can't teach a man how to speak truth when he has built his life on silence. You chose your side, Ethan. You chose it every time you let your mother mock me, every time you texted her, every time you came home smelling of someone else's perfume. His lips trembled. He wanted to argue, to defend, but no words came. Silence again. The same silence that had defined our marriage. Only now, it wasn't my prison. It was his. I walked past him, suitcase in hand, and opened the front door. The night air was cool, fresh, alive with freedom. I turned once, meeting his eyes one last time. Silence was your shield, Ethan. Tonight, it became your downfall. His shoulders slumped, his mouth still open but empty of words. Outside, the streetlights glowed, the world stretching open before me. My heart was heavy but free, carrying no lies, no shame, no silence that didn't belong to me. I walked into the night, each step steady, each breath lighter. Have you ever felt the moment your story changes? When betrayal no longer defines you, but strength does? That was me, suitcase in hand, leaving behind a house full of silence and stepping into a future filled with my own voice. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the end of being invisible. It was the beginning of a life where my silence belonged to me, and only me. Betrayal has a way of breaking you in silence before it ever shouts in your face. For years, I lived inside that silence, shrinking while Ethan and his mother rewrote my place in their world. But walking out of that house with my suitcase, I realized something I should have known long ago. Silence doesn't have to erase you. It can become your weapon. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't fight for scraps of loyalty that were never mine. I let the truth speak for itself. Proof is louder than excuses, and when it finally shone in front of everyone they had tried to impress, their power crumbled. Maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've felt invisible at your own table, erased by the very people who promised to love you. If you have, know this: you are not powerless. The same silence that once suffocated you can become the fire that frees you. That was my journey, from humiliation to exposure, from betrayal to freedom. It didn't happen in a single night. It happened through patience, through choosing truth over peace, through refusing to accept that silence had to mean defeat. And now, as I stand in my own voice, I want you to remember, you can rise too. You can take back what was stolen. You can walk away lighter than you ever thought possible. If this story struck something inside you, share it. Tell me in the comments where you're from, and if you've ever faced betrayal like this. Subscribe to Revenge Inside for more stories that expose lies, reveal strength, and prove that silence can be broken. Together, we'll keep turning pain into power.